So welcome everyone that's new. My name is Lauren Taylor. I'm with the RainWise program. Erin is the homeowner for this site. And we are gonna go over just the RainWise program and Erin's installation.
And let's just confirm, can everybody see the slides properly?
Yes, we're good, thanks.
Great, thank you.
I'm sure you already know this if you've been to a site, but this is being recorded. So please use the chat like you have been using. If you don't want to share your voice or your image, mute yourself when you're not speaking so we don't hear any background noise. And like I mentioned, just use the chat to ask questions. Or you can wait until the end of this presentation and unmute yourself to ask them live. Do you want to introduce yourself, Erin?
Sure, so I'm Aaron Clark. I'm the homeowner for this site, and I also work for the organization Stewardship Partners that is built around the mission of empowering caretakers of land, water, and community across the Puget Sound region. We do that through 3 different programs: the 12,000 Rain Garden Campaign for Puget Sound, Snow Me Stewardship Program, and the Salmon Safe Eco-Label Certification Program. And I can answer more questions about those, but I'll let Lauren continue from here.
Like I mentioned, I'm with RainWise, which is a partnership between King County Wastewater Treatment Division and Seattle Public Utilities. We provide rebates for rain gardens and cisterns for homeowners to put in their yard in high priority areas in Seattle. So it's just a Seattle program right now, but we will talk about ways for people that don't live in Seattle or that live in Seattle and are not eligible. And the website is 700milliongallons.org/RainWise or rainwise.seattle.gov. And in this presentation, we're just going to quickly go over the stormwater problem. The solution is RainWise, and specifically Erin's rain garden and cisterns, a quick Q&A, and then we'll go over all the resources and links to get you started, or at least give you more information about this awesome program. So what is the problem? Seattle looked really different 100 years ago, as we all probably know. After years of population increase and development, the forests and the meadows and other natural systems that were once here have been replaced with rooftops, driveways, paved surfaces that keep that rain from soaking into the ground. These non-porous or impervious surfaces cover about 60% of the land in Seattle, and the rate and volume of water running off into these hard surfaces, it has to go somewhere, right? So it flows into our stormwater pipes and ends up in the waterways. Our drainage system was built a long time ago. And if any of you have ever been on the Seattle tour downtown, the underground Seattle tour, you'll learn that originally they built a sewer system out of wood. So obviously currently not wood now, but it's after 100 years of that replacement, it really can't handle the large volumes of water in conjunction with those non-pervious surfaces. So that's why we're asking for your help, stopping that polluted runoff is the problem that RainWise is looking to address. In some neighborhoods, and in most outside of Seattle, we have a separated system. So on the top, you'll see the rain flows into the storm drains, goes straight onto the local waterways, and then the sewage is diverted to separate pipes. In other neighborhoods, as the bottom one in most of Seattle, the stormwater and sewage is collected into a combined system. So when we have heavy rains, these pipes can overflow into nearby water bodies like Lake Washington, Puget Sound, Lake Union, the Duwamish, and they're designed this way so it doesn't back up into our homes. But really, we don't want that polluted mixture of water going anywhere but the treatment plants, right? Because 10% of that, when it does overflow, is going to be raw sewage. But together, SPU and King County made a commitment to manage 700 million gallons, hence the website name, of stormwater runoff by 2025. And one of those programs is RainWise. Aaron, do you want to talk about this slide that the Nature Conservancy put out?
I can do a quick synopsis. I mean, so as Lauren mentioned, you know, there's the combined sewer, there's the separated sewer. Those two systems work differently, but at the end of the day, all of the water coming off of all of these impervious surfaces causes problems either way. Neither one of those systems actually cleans up stormwater very well. In one case, it mixes with raw sewage that then overflows, or in the other case, it doesn't get filtered, it doesn't get cleaned up at all. It doesn't mix with raw sewage, so that's nice, but it's still full of toxins that come off of the roofs, or the roads in particular, and flow right into our water bodies. And we know that that water is lethal to a lot of our native salmon species that are endangered. So it's kind of a big deal. And, you know, when I think about this stuff, big picture, what I think about is how do we make our cities function more like a forest? Because that is basically what the salmon and everything else evolved to thrive in that context. So how do we restore natural hydrology is kind of my overarching question that I ask myself every day. And really the green infrastructure strategy is that embodied. So you take your city and you try to make it function more like a forest. And in this image on the right, you can see some of the tools that we'll talk about today, and others as well. So porous pavements, building soil, bioswales, rain gardens, urban trees, and all of those things work together to help our cities function more like forests, and make that impervious stormwater generating condition less of a problem, because it doesn't have to be that way. It just is that way because we built our cities not thinking that it was going to be a problem.
Thank you. So the solution to this really horrible and disgusting problem is green stormwater infrastructure. And you know, RainWise is an opportunity for private property owners like you guys to be part of this solution. There's also large capital projects like huge underground storage tanks. So if you've been to Seward Park, the tennis courts there have can store like 2 million gallons of stormwater. That's part of a larger utility solution. And then also roadside rain gardens are another one, which is the picture that you'll see on that slide there. So far, I'd say around 2,000 people, homeowners in Seattle have gotten RainWise. The program's been around since 2011. In doing so, these homeowners are keeping water out of that combined sewer system during the heavy storms, limiting runoff and overflows into our waterways. And it's definitely working. I mean, these installations are controlling the rain that falls on the equivalent of 55 acres of rooftop. So that's effectively doing the work of 55 acres of open space. And this keeps about 28 million gallons of rain out of the sewer system every year. So what is a rain garden? Really important question, right? So it's a bowl-shaped landscape feature that is full of plants and spongy soil that allows water to soak into the ground. And RainWise rain gardens take the rain that fall on your rooftop and send it to a rain garden where it soaks into the soil, replenishes the groundwater supply. So it's not going into the storm sewers at all. They're really efficient. They can handle huge storms. The rain is going to disappear after 24 hours. You know, you're not going to get mosquitoes. It's not going to be a pond feature. And they're really efficient. Like I mentioned, they only require about 2 to 7% of the area they are treating, depending on how quickly your soil drains, and whether or not the water is first slowed by a cistern. As far as plants go, at the bottom of the bowl, you're going to need plants that can tolerate wet feet, such as dogwood, willow, grasses, rushes, sedges. But you can have more variety towards the top of the bowl, like natives and edibles. Let's move on to cisterns. So cisterns are used all around the world to collect rain, but RainWise cisterns can also help reduce combined sewer overflows. A lot of folks that go through this program originally started out with a rain barrel, and they were just like, what's the point? You know, it's with as much rain that we get at a time, rain barrels are what, 50, 60 gallons. And this right here, this photo is a 205 gallon, and that's probably that's the smallest one that you would start with the program. So all of them have a low flow valve at the bottom, and that low flow valve will let the collected water slowly trickle back into the sewer system. And that's the key to the whole program, right? The slow release of the water means it won't be rushing into the sewer pipes to overwhelm the treatment plant, causing these overflows and pollution. So basically, we send out a reminder to open the overflow right about now, I believe. So that way, the beginning of the rainy season, which we need real soon, to ensure that the cistern empties after each storm. But that means that in the summertime, you can save the water and use it for your garden. So that's a really, really quick overview of what a rain garden and cistern is. But if you're interested, you just have to go to our website, 700milliongallons.org/RainWise. You'll go to our eligibility page. You'll look at our Find a Contractor page. You'll contact that contractor. They'll come out. They'll do a site visit. They'll mutually agree on a plan, depending on like what you need. If you just need a rain garden and a cistern or whatever you're eligible for, you'll do that. Or you'll do a larger project like Erin has done, because a lot of these are most of them are landscapers and have a breadth of knowledge on all things landscaping, right? And then the contractor does all the work. So they'll go get the plants, they'll get all the materials, they do the installation, they rent the excavation if you need it. They'll schedule a pre-inspection and post-inspection with the city or the county, which is really important because you want to make sure everything's up to code. And then when when the project is done, you'll fill out the rebate paperwork and you'll get your rebate and enjoy your yard. And for 5 years, you have to maintain it, but obviously we hope that you'll maintain it even longer.
So you said this is Seattle only?
Yeah, so this is a Seattle program, but we are going to talk about how to figure out if where you live has some incentives.
So if we took the incentives out of it, if we paid for it ourselves, could we work with your contractors to get at least consulting?
Oh yeah, of course.
Program,
yeah.
In Bellevue, so we're not far from Seattle. We just may not qualify for financial support. Right.
Yeah, and so let's see. So if you're income limited, you can apply for the VPO or RainWise Access grants. If you're outside of Seattle but within King County, they have the Green Stormwater Infrastructure Mini Grant, which is actually through Erin's organization. It's been very successful, and I heard it's even easier than RainWise without the bureaucracy. And these grants give up to $1,500 in support for you to do a green infrastructure project, and that doesn't limit you to rain gardens and cisterns. It also includes deep paving and green roofs.
Okay, so again, if our income is such that we don't qualify, we're a high income, could we use the contractors and pay directly? Use your resources and your contractors?
Yeah, so RainWise in itself is not based on income, it's just based on location. But yes, you can use the RainWise contractors, you just won't get the RainWise rebate.
And you can find them all on your info on your ways. Actually, a couple of years ago, I saw you guys at Solar Fest, and then when I tried to contact you based on the email that I got, I never got any response. We've since done a bunch of drainage work, but we did have it drain into the ground in our yard. We didn't have it like flowing into the sewers because we had no resources. But they took some of the water that came off of the roof that was going into plants and put it into this drainage system, and I want to use it to the plants. So I need someone to help me fix what was done, and I'd like to add some other features like some way to collect the water and other things.
So the RainWise contractor list would be a great resource for that. Not all of those contractors, some of them are very small and work very locally, sort of at a neighborhood level within parts of Seattle, but some of them work well outside. I know, I think it's Bloom, Jesse Bloom's company is one of the contractors listed on the website. I think she's actually based on the east side and works there as well. And you know, for that work, you may be eligible for the mini grant as well, which for anyone in most of Western King County, there's a bit of a funny geographic line around eligibility there too, but Bellevue is included in that for sure. And that's up to $1,500. It's a higher level. You can get a larger mini grant if you are income limited or nonprofit, but you know, it's still $1,500 can be a big help for a project like that. And the RainWise contractors are, some of them would definitely be willing to work in Bellevue. You might just have to call a few of them to find the right one who is. But I know that Bloom does. I think it's Northwest Bloom. I think Rain Dog works outside of Seattle quite a bit as well. And I'm sure there are others on that list.
Yeah, and I will say that, you know, once you do contact the contractor, you know, that's between the homeowner and the contractor, and the RainWise program solely exists to kind of promote the program and make those connections. But I will put my email in the chat. So if you do have any issues contacting them, just send me an email and I will
Thank you.
find them. It is it's almost beginning to be the busier season for contractors. And most of them it's their one-man show, one-woman show, maybe two. And so they kind of, some of them do have a reputation for needing to be called or emailed a few times. But like I said, if you do have any issues, just give me an email or email me in the beginning, and I can just send a mass email out and be like, we have a homeowner in Bellevue that's not eligible for RainWise, but is looking for a contractor to work with them. Because like Erin said, some of them are pretty site specific. And I am also wondering if Bellevue has any incentives or even a contractor list of their own. But like, I know Shoreline does, but I don't know about Bellevue off the top of my head.
Yeah, my recollection of the city of Bellevue, they have a green infrastructure program, but it's more focused on capital projects and also working with developers that are doing larger scale projects. I don't think, as far as I know, they don't have a sort of homeowner, single family home scale incentive program in place, but the mini grant does apply there. So it can use instead.
Well, any resources you have would be great. The contractors that we all saw, we're all concentrating on getting the water off of our driveway and our roof and into a drainage system dug into our backyard, like down low, which was fine, but I was using some of that water just as a natural flow with just a little director into some of my plants, and now everything's going down below, and I don't want to water the plants with tap water. I also would like to collect some of that and use that for my vegetable garden in the summer, and there's no one now that wants to, you know, come in, and the pipes are there. You just got to tap into them. I mean, it's not a big project, but we don't feel comfortable doing it ourselves. We need someone that will help us. So so help with getting a cistern and help with just redirecting that. And if there's an area in the garden that I love the plants and different garden sections. So if we can put a rain garden in someplace else, that'd be great too.
Yes, definitely.
I'll put my email in the chat as well. You can email Lauren and I, and we'll definitely
make it happen.
Follow up.
Great, thank you. This was Lori, by the way, that you were talking to.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lori.
Thanks, Lori. So a really great resource page that I always mention in the RainWise presentations is 12,000raingardens.org, which is also led, I believe, by Erin. And it has this map shows all the different incentive programs in the area. Seattle has the most developed with RainWise, but we also have probably the biggest problem when it comes to the pollution. So that's why it is a program. But in the couple years that I've worked for RainWise, other programs have slowly kind of popped up. And so I do think that people are realizing that this is an important issue to address. So 12,000raingardens.org, definitely go to that. There's also other resources on there, like there's the Western Washington Rain Garden Handbook, if you want to look through that about how to build your own rain garden. And yeah. So now I'm gonna give the presentation to Aaron.
All right.
He's gonna go over his yard.
Stop the share, and then I'm gonna restart the share. Hold on a second. Hey friends, welcome to my rain garden and my home here in View Ridge. I'm going to talk to you about some of the RainWise features of this home. I'm standing right in the middle of my rain garden, which is a nice, small, compact little bowl-shaped garden that captures runoff from about half the roof of my entire house. Alright, so to tell the rain garden story and the RainWise story of this property, it's a good idea to start with the roof. So here we are on the back side of my house. You can see the gutter up here, and this is one of the downspouts that captures half of the roof runoff, and the other one is on the other side of the house. I'll show you that in a minute, but you can see the downspout, just like any normal downspout, comes down, but then it has a diversion. And what you see here, this is not a rainy day, but we have condensation this morning, a bit of dew. It's actually coming down off of my painted metal roof and dripping into this collection and filter box. And then it's diverted into the cistern here. On the side you'll see what is actually, I can't quite point to it, but what is actually called a first flush diverter. That captures the first bits of water that carry the most pollution or fine sediments and whatnot down. But everything after that first couple of gallons diverts over through this pipe and into this cistern. And this cistern here is a 400-gallon cistern. And it captures all that excess runoff. And I have it hooked up to a hose bib right here. And this setup's important because this is my hose bib. I've got a diverter, so I've got one hose that goes out to my front yard, another one that I can, another prong that I can fill a watering can from, and then I've got this here, which is my low flow orifice that goes back into the side sewer. So in the rainy months, I turn this direction, and it allows a slow, gradual flow to go back into the sewer system. And then during the summer, when I want to collect rain, I keep that closed, and it allows the tank to fill up. And in this house, with the roof size that I've got, this 400-gallon cistern fills up after about 2 inches of rain or so. So a couple of good spring rainstorms will fill this tank up, and then I've got 400 gallons to use to water my yard. Alright, so here's my other cistern. So the one you saw a moment ago was a 420-gallon cylindrical tank, similar to a rain barrel, but equivalent to 8 rain barrels in terms of how much water it stores. The footprint's really not that much bigger, but the storage volume is immense. But then here's another cistern. This is a 530-gallon tank, and this is in the front of my house, and I have just a simple cedar plank screen in front of it that I train some vines to cover up. And the cisterns, you know, are not, most people don't find them particularly attractive. That makes sense. So this one's covered up with a screen. But the nice thing about this tank is that it is a what they call a slimline design. And if you come over here, you can see it nestles up here next to my house, and has a pretty narrow width. It's not even as broad as I am shoulder to shoulder, and I'm not a particularly broad-shouldered folk guy. So anyway, here is the tank itself hiding behind. You can't very well see the downspout, but it's the same situation as in the other cistern. You can see the straps that hold it down to the house in case of earthquake and stuff like that. This is the overflow. I have one of these on the other tank as well. And this overflow, when the tank is full and gets more rainwater into it, this overflow goes down underground in this case, and flows to that rain garden that you saw earlier. But we have the same low flow diverter that in the winter, let's see, I turn and it allows water to go through this, what's called the low flow orifice, and it's just a little rubber disc with a small hole in it, a pinhole about 1/4 inch in diameter, I think. And it allows a steady, slow flow to go into this same drainage pipe out to the rain garden itself. And then in the spring, I close that off, and this fills up again with about 2 inches of rain. 2 to 3 inches of rain will fill it up. And I have a hose connector here where I can fill up a watering can, another hose to go out and water the yard. I don't have a pump system or anything like that to run an irrigation system. And in general, I run a pretty low water consumption yard, but I do grow quite a bit of food. And really, I have not had to use city water to water my yard for 2 summers. It helps when you get a couple of rainstorms in the middle of summer to refill your tank, for sure. And with these simple technologies that were paid for with the RainWise rebate, covered I think 80 to 90% of the RainWise part of the landscaping project. I've been able to get 100% of the runoff that lands on my roof to either infiltrate into the rain garden or at least be attenuated by going through the cistern system, which slows down the flow and keeps our sewer system, which I'm in a combined sewer neighborhood where the stormwater goes into the sanitary sewer, and that I'm able to slow down and reduce the number of overflow events that dump a bit of raw sewage into Lake Washington, which that's a good thing. So arguably the coolest part of having a RainWise yard is not the water itself, although I appreciate that for the sake of the salmon, for the sake of the orcas, for the sake of our swimming beaches, but it's what I get to do with that water that I think is the best part. And what I get to do with this water is that I water a permaculture food garden. So I'm standing in front of my favorite part of that garden, which is my peach trees. These frost peaches produce a ton of fruit in the summer months, and I'm able to water them entirely from rainwater, which the rainwater, unlike city water, is free, and it has no chlorine in it, no added other chemicals of any kind. It's just rainwater that falls from the sky. If anything, it's got a few extra nutrients. There's a little bit of airborne deposition of whatever's in the air, a little bit of car exhaust and things like that. But by and large, plants respond really well to rainwater and oftentimes grow quite a bit better than they do in city water. So I've got peach trees, I've got plums, I've got raised beds, a fig tree, tomatoes, blueberries, lots of blueberries, apple trees as well, an Asian pear, I have an olive tree, the list goes on and on. A lot of herbs, and all of these things that I am able to use in the kitchen are all fed by this RainWise system as well. So fruits of the labor, if you will. It's I don't even want to call it a perk. It's really the main reason that I do it. And I'll go through a little site sketch of what I did. So this is actually a green infrastructure site planning worksheet that I developed a little while back that's available on the 12,000 Rain Gardens resource library. 12,000raingardens.org/resources will get you there. You can find this and other things. And basically some simple instructions, a little piece of grid paper, some icons to show what you've got or what you want to build. So zooming in a little bit on my hand-drawn sketch of what I ended up doing with my property. This is my yard, and you can see this is the roof area here. Hopefully you can see my mouse. And the way I had the gutters designed, we did a remodel on this house. We wanted to capture as much rainwater as possible and do our part in that process, and include as much green infrastructure as possible. So we had the gutters all run to 2 points on the house to make collection a little bit easier. So one half of the roof, or a little bit less than a half, 800 square feet in this case, run back to one cistern. That's the 400-gallon cistern that you saw. And then the other roof area, including space over the garage, runs around gutters to the front side of the house where that slimline tank was that you saw. And those two, the 400-gallon has that low flow orifice that actually drains back into the side sewer, whereas the 500-gallon tank, the low flow orifice and overflow drain out to the rain garden. Now, to make my system function a little bit better, that hose that you saw attached to the 400-gallon actually runs out all the way to the front yard to a small blueberry swale. It's basically a little scooped out area that acts like a rain garden as well. So there's a low, slow flow all winter long that goes out there. And then in addition to that, I've got permeable paved areas where I just use pavers, so water can actually, when it rains, instead of water running off of those surfaces, they soak in on site. And then in addition to the blueberries, I marked all of the trees that I planted around the property. A couple of peach trees here, a bay laurel, got a fig tree here I didn't mark, a persimmon tree, a pear tree, a couple of plum trees, and a bunch of other fruit trees in the parking strip as well. So let me see, I'm going to, all right. So with that, here are some of the links. There are some additional videos if you want to see what a combined sewer overflow looks like when it's actually happening in real life. This rainy day reconnaissance video, 60 minutes long, you can kind of skip through it. It's a homemade handheld video that I made one rainy day to go chase some stormwater. We did a public service announcement about rain gardens, a really short version of that message as well, called It's Your Choice. Sound and Vision actually takes you underwater to see what some of those stormwater overflow events look like out in Puget Sound, following a super duper stormwater hero named Laura James, who's a scuba diver. And of course, the 700 million gallons website as well. So I want to at that point, see if anybody has questions, and I'll probably stop the screen share and let people do video from there if you have any. So, I need to restart my video. Hi. So, does anybody have questions that you'd like to ask?
Hi, I asked in the chat, but I'll ask it again. Can you share the cost of the full rainwater and retention system? We're just kind of curious of, like you said, about 90% was covered. Kind of giving us a roundabout estimate of what that would entail.
Yeah, so for the two cisterns in the rain garden, it's a little bit hard for me to get too specific about it because that was part of a larger landscape project. So we had retaining walls and paved paver patio area built. But a typical project for a single family home runs in the $5,000 to $6,000 range, and the typical rebate is around $4,000, $4,500. And the rebate amount for most systems is, or maybe all systems, Lauren, you can correct me out here, is $4 per square foot of roof area. So if you have a 1,000 square foot roof area, you can get up to $4,000 in rebate. And I think the average project is, the rebate covers about 80%, 80 to 90% of the project cost. So the cisterns themselves, hard costs, those tanks run in the $500 to $1,000 range just for the tank itself. And then installation roughly doubles that. But it also matters quite a bit where you are. Contractor business costs are quite a bit higher in Seattle than in areas outside of Seattle, sort of in concentric circles as well. So there's quite a bit of variability there. Does that help answer the question, Lisa?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
And Lauren, do you have anything to add there on costs?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because, when we say the 80% just because, you do have a lot of people that are doing RainWise, like Aaron did, as part of like a larger project. But there are customers that have gone through the program and had 100% covered. Usually that's just with the cistern. So like Aaron mentioned, the rain garden is $4 per square foot. The cistern is $3 per square foot. But yeah, and it also depends on the contractor. I mean, they have different rates for their own labor, but for the most part, yeah, it's 80% covered, I'd say, depending. Who was your contractor, Aaron? Homegrown?
I use Stone Soup.
Stone Soup.
Stone Soup. And he doesn't typically work in North Seattle, where I live, but we're buddies, so I talked him into it just to disarm. Any other questions or details you'd like us to go into more detail on?
I was kind of also wondering about like the planting and like you mentioned permeable paving. Does the program like go over that, or is it like there's recommendations that you can follow, or just kind of getting advice on what would work best with that sort of landscaping that would help with rain collection and native planting and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, RainWise offers training to all the contractors. So all the contractors who participate in that program have gotten some level of guidance. But one of the, in my opinion, at least coolest things about the RainWise program is that it really allows these small businesses to create and get creative and come up with innovative solutions and strategies. One of the reasons I chose Stone Soup is because of their emphasis on edibles. They love edible landscapes and permaculture in particular. So that drew me in. I love to support native plants as well, but I wanted to balance those things out, and I wanted to eat my yard and give my kids something to do in the spring and summer to harvest. So there is guidance. There's also at the state level, there's guidance on what plants to plant in a rain garden, what plants to not plant in a rain garden. So that helps. And then as far as permeable pavers, the RainWise program does not incentivize that, but that is something that a lot of the RainWise contractors are familiar with as well. Some of them do a lot of hardscape work. And so there is, depending on what system you choose, I just chose 2 foot by 2 foot concrete paving stones with an underlayment of sand and gravel. And it drains fine, but there are systems that are actually designed to store even more water that sort of act almost like cisterns themselves. There's a local company called Paver Guide that's just getting started that has a really cool plastic grid system that sits underneath the pavers that stores quite a bit of extra water.
Awesome.
I want to mention that I'm going to put the RainWise resources page in the chat. Both the video, or the short version and the long version of Aaron's tour is on this website, along with all of those links that he mentioned, and a bunch of rain garden cistern information. We have a planting plan if you're curious about different plants that a lot of contractors use. This planting plan was developed maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, originally to educate the contractors on specific rain garden plants, but most of our contractors, because they have been doing it for a while, have pretty good knowledge in this area. And a lot of different homeowners are kind of like, want to take the reins and pick their own plants. And the contractors are always like happy to work with, you know, even existing plants that you have, or like what Erin said, putting in edibles and natives. So yeah, check out that resources page.
Let's see, it looks like Pamela, Michael, and somebody whose name is just the letter D. Do any of you folks have questions or anything you'd like to hear more about?
I have just a quick question, or Denise. How long did it take you to grow all of those?
So my garden now is it 4 years? I think it's 4 years old. And I mean, I was also really intentional about trying to retain as many of the mature plantings that I had in my yard, even though I did an entire overhaul of the landscape and redid quite a number of things. I was able to retain almost all of my old rhododendrons and some of those older native plants. But of what was established during that planting plan and that planting process, screaming children, it's okay. Those are about 4 years old. So I have peach trees now that produce in alternating years huge crops of peaches. I had peaches until, you know, all winter long that I had frozen last year from two frost peach trees that had matured and that I had sort of fan pruned so that they're somewhat two-dimensional along a south-facing concrete wall. So they actually have quite a bit of heat that they like. So yeah, that's the typical age. And I found the blueberries are still growing. I'm hoping that they will continue to produce more and more year over year. Those take a little bit longer, in my experience, to establish. I still haven't gotten a persimmon out of my persimmon tree, but I'm hoping that I will.
The growth was really impressive in your video. I would love to have that.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
So I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Now, did you use a metal roof to collect water so that, you know, for edibles it was healthy, or?
I did. So I selected a painted metal roof for that reason at my house. But there's actually been quite a bit of good research on roof materials. The Department of Ecology and Washington State University are doing a few different projects testing different roofing materials. And they found that by and large, most roofing materials, the water that runs off of them are safe to use to water a garden. You know, especially fruiting bushes, the thing with permaculture is you've got mostly fruiting plants. I do have a raised bed that I water with my roof water as well, but you know, if you've got veggies, leafy greens, and things, and so the water is going directly on them, you care about water quality more there. With fruit trees, the way that the plant physiology works, they typically, the plants actually are careful about what they put into their fruit because it's kind of like their kids. That's how I think about it from an evolutionary standpoint. So I picked metal roof, but what they've seen is that the asphalt shingle roofs that are most common across Seattle and Western Washington are relatively safe as well. They don't leach much year over year. And the only roof type that I've heard of that's actually pretty, that can be harmful is cedar shake. Because those cedar shakes are oftentimes treated with arsenic or something like that to keep moss from growing on them, and they can actually leach some metals and a bit of arsenic into the water. Again, I don't know the toxicity of that for human consumption. Obviously, you're not going to drink it, and what happens to it when you put it in the yard. But does the RainWise program, Lauren, have any specific guidance on roof materials and using it for edible gardens?
Great question, and we get that a lot. There's actually on the resources page that I'll just put it again in the chat for new folks. There is a pamphlet of research done by the Sightline Institute. The main thing is make sure that you're not using the water from the first flush, so like the big first rain in the fall, or excuse me, in the winter. But it's also like up to you. You can put a filter at the end of the downspout, I believe, or the cistern. I've had contractors, most contractors are going to say you can use the water. There's one contractor who I do know that did have cancer, and she was like, no, I'm never going to use that. But generally speaking, according to Sightline's research, it is safe to use it. So.
Right, and there is that Sightline research from, and that's actually 4 or 5 years old now, but the Sightline Institute used to have a dedicated stormwater journalist who focused on this issue for a number of years, and she did a compilation of research that was up to date at that time on different roofing materials, and it was pretty definitive that, you know, roof water is safe to use in your garden, safe to use in food beds. And that article you can find on the 12,000 Rain Gardens resource library. You have to look for it a little bit, but if you search for, you know, is rain barrel water safe to use? And especially if you put Sightline in the search, that'll help as well. It looks like we've got a fair number of new folks joining us. If anybody would like to introduce yourself and let us know what you have questions on, we'll probably restart this presentation in a little bit. For those of you that have been with us for this first 45 minutes or so, if you have questions that you want to ask before we restart the presentation, please do ask. And in the meantime, I'm going to put up the thank you slides because I need to do that for our sponsors to make sure that they get adequately recognized for their generosity and support. Let's see. Oh yeah, I did want to mention these upcoming RainWise events. There are contractor meetups coming up on September 17th, as well as November 9th and October 14th. There's a special event all about cisterns on October 29th, and a RainWise and Salmon Season joint event on September 29th as well. So these are all informational events available to you. Also want to point out that there's a Northwest Green Building SLAM Summit coming up in October. The SLAM is on October 13th and 20th, and the summit carries on, I think, the 13th, 14th, 15th, and 20th, 21st, 22nd. But you can see more at northwestgreen.org as well. That will be a super fun event. Here are some links to some of the social media for RainWise, as well as 12,000 Rain Gardens and Stewardship Partners. You can see a number of different videos on our YouTube channel. And our Pinterest page is actually a great, it's become a little bit of an obsession of mine. Every time I see something cool, I'll put it up there. So examples of cool permeable pavement. One of my favorite things about rain gardens and green infrastructure is the moving water. Every time it rains, you know, you can have a water feature that's actually helping the environment, not just drawing electricity and spraying water all over the place. And so people have gotten super creative with that stuff, and I love to geek out on it. And these are the sponsors for the Green Home Tour. Just want to put that up there and hold it there while we have any other questions.
Yeah, this is Micah, and thanks a lot for sharing. I'm sorry if you covered this already. I got a puppy running around here that is a little distracting. But in the summer months, are you able to do to accomplish all of your watering with water that's been stored from the early summer rainfall or late spring rainfall, or do you still need supplemental water?
That's a great question, and I hear from different people different things. So I will just speak for myself. But I have been able to water my yard, I would say, throughout the summer, about 90% from rainwater alone. And there's a few different things that make that possible. So I have 2 different cisterns. They total 950 gallons of storage, 420 and 530. And I don't water my lawn. And I trained my plants to be as drought resistant as possible. And I picked plants in general that were already drought resistant. But that said, I'm also growing quite a bit of fruit. So I have peach trees. I have quite a few tomatoes in my raised bed. I have blueberries, plum trees, cherry trees, apple trees, a pear tree, a persimmon tree, a fig tree, raspberries, so rhubarb, all, you know, a bunch of stuff. And I'm able to water those pretty efficiently, kind of like once a week, even in the dry season, but I water them by hand with a hose deeply on the sort of the root area of each one of those plants. And I walk around and I do that with care. I could set it up with an automated system if I had the, I don't know if it's patience that I lack to do that or resources or what, but by watering them in that way and then allowing them to get pretty dry, you can actually train the plants to stick their roots a little deeper into the soil, manage their expectations, get them used to the fact that I'm stingy, and get them to be a little bit more aggressive in their root growth. But between all of that, you know, I can pretty much water throughout the summer with just that rainwater. And I guess the one other piece of that that's significant or interesting is just that, you know, every summer is so different. So this summer actually has been great for my garden because we've gotten a couple of decent rain events throughout the middle of the summer. So, you know, it'll be dry for 2 or 3 weeks. My cisterns will start to get kind of low, and then we'll get an inch of rain, and then they'll fill all the way back up. Or you know, a good thunderstorm can get my tanks half full, or sometimes even more, with just a good splash of water. And even a little bit of dew will give me a few, you know, couple dozen gallons as well. Does that help answer the question, Michael?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. And I also have to say that rainwater is the water that plants prefer. In my experience thus far, and I've talked to some other folks about it, you know, the water that comes from the city is great for drinking and it's controlled and it's safe and all that, but they have to do some stuff to it to keep it safe for us. And, you know, there's fluoride in it, but there's also chlorine and other things that make sure it's not full of bacteria and things like that. Plants don't care as much about bacteria, but they don't really love chlorine and some of those other chemicals that are added. So you'll find that, you know, plants that are watered with rainwater oftentimes really thrive. And some plants are more sensitive to that than others, but that's also a really cool feature about watering with rainwater.
Lori put a great question in the chat. You know, what is the difference between a rain garden and a bioswale? I just briefly said bioswales usually clean or process the water and redirect it, where rain gardens completely absorb the rainwater from the rooftop. Is that an okay answer? It might be a little different for Seattle.
Yeah, I really wish there was a cleaner, clearer answer to that. People use these terms in different ways. If you are the Washington State Department of Ecology, a RainWise or a rain garden is a very specific thing. It's not engineered, it's small, it doesn't have any kind of drainage underneath it. It only flows in, as Lauren said. And anything that has what we call an underdrain, meaning you've got the bowl-shaped garden, you've got those spongy soils, you've got the plants, but underneath it you have a collection pipe, or a French drain type pipe, or a perforated pipe that collects all the water that's been through those soils. That's called a bioretention facility. It's technical jargon, but useful for the engineers and the planners to differentiate between those different things. Bioswale is one of those words that gets used to talk about bioretention facilities, to talk about rain gardens, to talk about a grass ditch next to the road. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, so it's kind of a catch-all. And I guess the term swale also just sort of indicates or implies that it's long, linear, that it kind of has a direction to it, like a stream bed that water comes in at one end and it runs to another end, and that there's some amount of conveyance to it, but that's not even always true. So that's my attempt at disambiguation, but you know, this world is a little bit full of jargon, for better or worse.
Yeah.
Oh, and there was also the question about automation as well, Lauren. It looks like you answered. Did you answer that in the chat?
I said I don't know.
Okay.
I think Lori has a potential great business idea with this, though, if it hasn't been done. But I'm not sure as far as
there are. So I know through our friends at the Seattle 2030 district, they work with large-scale landowners and commercial landowners in the urban core of Seattle. And they've been doing some pretty cool work with rain catchment systems. And some of those landowners have done really complex systems where they've got pumps and timers and sprinkler systems. And some of those systems are reusing water inside the building for flushing toilets and cooling towers and things like
they
that.
should be on the Green Home Tour.
Yeah, I know.
year.
Actually, I wonder if we could get them next year.
Next year
so some of
yeah.
So there's hotels that are doing this, and new buildings that are doing it, and there's other folks that are figuring out how to do it as a retrofit system. So there are, but I know actually there's a guy down at the Pierce Conservation District down in Puyallup named Alan, who has done a system where he got a small pump, the kind that you would use for a water system in an RV, and he hooked it up to his small cistern. You know, I think it's like a 500 or 1,000 gallon system that he uses to do a drip irrigation system. There's definitely people that are doing this, but I think there's need for more as well. And I'll say I've also worked on a project that the Boeing company has funded with some really smart engineers at a company called Geosyntec, where we're trying to create smart rain gardens. And these are integrating things like weather data, climate data, and doing real-time monitoring of the water coming through these systems. And we've got the rain gardens in these controlled boxes, similar to a Gradix system that I think, Lauren, you've probably heard about these as well. But basically it's a rain garden in a box, but then it's got a system of pumps and monitors that say, you know, how much water is coming? Is it going to rain a lot more? If it's going to rain a lot more, let's turn the pumps on a little bit higher and get more water through this system, so that we have more capacity and we're less likely to overflow or cause floods later. So that technology is coming online. It's relatively new, and Boeing is definitely trying to advance it and help the innovation there and get that out there. And we're working in the next year to actually create a site that would be a demonstration of that, so people could actually come and visit it and copy what they've done.
I have a quick question. I'm under Dan, this is my husband, we're watching. Is this just for Seattle area? Like when I went to the 700 RainWise thing, our address doesn't show up and we're in Woodinville. So.
Yeah, so RainWise is for Seattle only currently, but the GSI mini grant, which I think, Lauren, did you say the link for that is on that page that you linked?
Yes, but I can also link it in the chat.
Oh, great.
We also missed the very beginning, so if you
No
want
worries.
to show whatever summary video, we're waiting for that eventually.
Well, we watched the GART as well.
Yeah.
Great. Well, yeah, so the if you go to 12,000raingardens.org under resources and incentives, the GSI mini grant program is there. And there's a whole list of other incentive programs that are available across Puget Sound. Not every neighborhood, not every city has an incentive program, but in Woodinville, I believe that's inside of the wastewater treatment division service area for King County. So you would be eligible for the GSI mini grant, if I'm correct about that. And you can email me. I'll put my email in the chat, ac@stewardshippartners And I'd be happy to send you more information on that and help you find whatever incentives you're eligible for. And I will say, you know, as far as you know, where these solutions matter, it really is across all of our built environments, across all of our urban areas globally. You know, stormwater is a major problem. The water that runs off of impervious surfaces that is not managed or treated is a huge source of pollution. In urban water bodies, it's almost always the single largest source of water pollution because it is collecting everything from a huge, huge catchment area. Anything that drips off of a car gets on there. Anything that is ground up in tire rubber, which turns out to be kind of a big deal, that's getting into our water. So these things do matter pretty much everywhere we are. There are certain hot spots where the problem is worse than others, but it's a helpful strategy to restore natural hydrology no matter where you are.
I have a question from Nancy.
Oh, good.
About the maintenance required on cisterns. So the maintenance required on cisterns is it's like a kind of a once a year thing. I actually do a lot of the maintenance for RainWise. For the most part, it's cleaning out the basket that sits in the top, which is mostly like leaves and debris and some of the roof shingle sand that kind of comes down. And then other things are like you have to check the low flow washer to make sure it's not clogged, and kind of just general upkeep and make sure that like nothing on your cistern's falling apart. So it's pretty basic, and it's kind of designed to be basic, but it's kind of a once a year thing. So.
Aaron, quick one on the type of roofing on your buildings. Is it composite asphalt shingles or metal, or what do you have?
I actually have a bit of both. So when I remodeled my house, I did metal roof, just a painted metal roof. But there's the garage I did not remodel, and it still has asphalt shingles. And there's actually great research on different roofing materials. You can find there's a report that the Sightline Institute did a few years back summarizing all the research that's out there. The Department of Ecology and Washington State University have done a good job of testing out different roofing materials. And I will say the one that is of greatest concern is actually cedar shake, because those roofing shingles are oftentimes impregnated with cyanide, or I think it's cyanide, something very poisonous to keep moss from growing on it. And it leaches that as well as heavy metals into the water coming off your roof. But virtually every other roof material, whether it's torch down, even tar roofs on flat roofs, and PVC membranes, metal roofs. I think copper roofs leach quite a bit of copper. They're also very expensive. But even the asphalt shingles are not particularly toxic. They have pretty low levels of pollutants and are considered pretty safe to use on a lot of different types of gardens, including some food gardens. And for me, my garden's primarily permaculture, meaning that it's a lot of fruit trees. And so those fruit trees are pretty good guardians of their fruit, and they don't put the worst things that they soak up through their roots into their fruit. Things like leafy vegetables or carrots are things that you would want to be a lot more careful about growing in water that wasn't clean. Does that help answer the question?
It does, thanks.